On to go. Dismiss.
And Job took up his parable, and Job said, "Those were the days when I went out to the city gate and took my place among the honored elders. The young men saw me and stepped aside, and even the aged rose and stood up in respect at my coming. The highest officials of the city stood in quietness. All rejoiced in what I said. All who saw me spoke well of me. For I, as an honest man, helped the poor in their need and protected the fatherless who had no one to help them. I helped those who were ready to perish, and they blessed me. All I did was just and honest, for righteousness was my clothing. I served as eyes for the blind and feet for the lame. I was as a father to the poor and saw to it that even strangers received a fair trial. I thought, surely I shall die quietly in my nest after a long and good life. For everything that I did prospered. Fresh honors were constantly given me, and my abilities were constantly renewed. Everyone listened to me and valued my advice, and were silent until I spoke. And after I spoke, they spoke no more, for my counsel satisfied them. They longed for me to speak, as those in drought time long for rain. When they were discouraged, I smiled, and that encouraged them and lightened their spirits. I told them what they should do and corrected them as their chief. And as a king instructs his army, or as one who comforts those who mourn. Adonai mo Adam vatedor ehu, ben enosh vatichashvehu, Adam lehevel damor yomov gotzel over, baboker yatzitz v'cholof le'erev yomolel v'yorvesh, ta sheveno shadakov atomer shuvu v'nei Adam, lu chachmu yaskilu zos yavinu la'acharisom, Ki lo v'moso yikach hakol lo yeredach harov kavodo. Podeh Adonai nefesh avado v'lo ye'eshmu chol hachosim bo. O God, thou abidest amidst the ceaseless tides of time that sweep away the generations. We have come to this place, in this moment in eternity, to bid farewell and to say goodbye to all that remains mortal of thy child, Ed. We who loved him have come to recall the happy days when he walked on this earth. When blessed by his love we lived our lives. He is with us even now, though the snows of many winters are now destined to cover his grave. And so now, speaking the most personally meaningful words of memorial tribute are among those who knew him the best and who loved him the most, beginning with Ed's nephews, Shmuel, Jonathan, and Jared.
To you, he was the mayor, the friend, the movie reviewer, the restaurant critic, the voice of reason. To our children, he was their doting Uncle Eddie.
But for us, he was something different. He was the loving uncle who respected us, challenged us, and encouraged us to be all that we could be. He wanted us to know that public service was the most noble of professions, when done honestly and done well, but that we should each follow our own path.
He encouraged us to follow our dreams. After all, it worked pretty well for him. For a man whose father arrived at Ellis Island after the long voyage in steerage from the European shtetl, to grow up to be the mayor of the greatest city in the world certainly defies all odds. It encourages one to dream of great things and limitless possibilities.
He never simply accepted our opinion in a political disagreement. Rather, he wanted us to build our arguments, be accountable for what we said, and he reveled in the process.
When our father Alvin and our uncle Harold, Ed's brother, were alive, they would constantly, lovingly argue over the issues of the day. It was the battle of the experts. This set a wonderful example about the joy of discourse, the importance of rhetoric, and the value of intellectual disagreement.
Although Ed could be strident in his public opinions and statements, it was in this private family setting that he expressed his doubts and vulnerability. Wanting to know what we thought about his perspectives, how he had articulated his policies and opinions in articles and in his columns, or how he had done on the talk shows.
That said, he always listened to his sister Pat in matters of family.
As much as Ed loved the limelight, he found sanctuary within the family. He didn't need to be entertaining or fawned over. When he arrived at one of our family's homes with that trademark twinkle in his eye, Ed had the uncanny ability to lie down on the couch and instantly fall asleep. He was able to let his guard down.
Paradoxically, he was equally skilled at instantly waking up to embrace one of our children, to find out the score of his or her soccer games, the result of the latest report card, or how the past weekend's chess tournament turned out. To them, Ed never asked, "How am I doing?" It was always, "How are you doing?"
Ed had 7 grandnieces and nephews: Kayla, Jordan, Hannah, Noah, Sasha, Perry, and Ben. When he was with them, he had the look, the one that fathers get when we gaze at our children. Amazed at their beauty, their intelligence, their individuality, somehow unbelieving that they are part of us.
These 7 lucky children and young adults really had a 5th grandparent. Ed loved them with all of his being, and they are so fortunate that they now hold that love in their hearts.
When we each brought home the woman we would eventually marry, Ed welcomed them, thrilled for us, and full of love and acceptance.
It would be hard to overstate the importance of food at our family gatherings. With Ed leading the clarion call to brunch or dinner, he would arrive at our homes laden with bags from Balducci's or Zabar's, full of bagels and lox, brownies and babka.
In our private family time, there was the Uncle Eddie dichotomy. He would revel in the attention of the public when out with us at a movie or a restaurant, while at the same time enjoying the intimacy of the family moment.
As mayor, he had his catchphrases, and as uncle, he had his own unique ways of conveying his love.
When we were kids, he would grab us by our then long hair, pull back and stare straight into our eyes. Other times, he would just look at us and squeeze shut his eyes for a second and reopen them. No words were necessary. The love was palpable, and he felt blessed by the life he had.
It's amazing that even in his 80s, Ed was still our mother's big brother. They enjoyed each other's company immensely, spoke on the phone daily, never running out of things to say, and saw each other at least once a week to share a meal.
Ed was fortunate to have had such an amazing circle of friends and staff. You are too numerous to thank by name, but please know that we will always be indebted to you for your kindness, your compassion, your inclusiveness, and most importantly, your loyalty to our uncle.
Ed would often talk about his staff, how the people who worked with him on a daily basis were the best. You allowed Ed to keep his unique Ed Koch-ness, to remain relevant and meaningful. You were the ones who worked these long days and nights, even if you might have needed more sleep than our favorite former mayor.
We would also like to express our tremendous gratitude to Mayor Bloomberg, Diane Coffey, Patty Harris, Nanette Smith, and the mayor's office for all their help during this difficult time.
Ed died with dignity, without pain or a prolonged period of illness. just as he had wanted. And our family is so grateful. A special thank you also to the doctors, nurses, and staff who exhibited such compassion and skill and made his final transition as graceful as possible.
We were blessed with the privilege of having Ed Koch as our uncle.
The city of New York was blessed to have him as mayor.
And because of all of you, he truly felt blessed and felt that he was the luckiest man in the world.
Over the past 4 or 5 years, as a middle school and high school student, I've written numerous essays with the prompts, "Who in the world do you most look up to?" or "What famous figure do you aspire to be like?" My teachers made this an easy task. My answer was always my Uncle Ed. I speak for all of my cousins when I say that Uncle Eddie actually felt like a third grandfather to each of us. He was the real-life example of how hard work, a drive to achieve excellence, and a passion to better the world would take you great places and allow you to soar. Ed was always there for us. It didn't matter how busy he was or what the occasion was. He always made time for us. It brings a smile to my face right now just to think about our loving uncle. He had so many important things going on and worked so hard every single day, even in his late 80s. Yet he would stop whatever he was doing and made us feel like we were the center of his universe. We are blessed to have this one-of-a-kind uncle share our holiday dinners and family events with us. Even with everything going on in his life, I believe that our happiness was the thing that made him the most happy, and I will be forever grateful that he was in my life.
Uncle Eddie. Most commentaries about his life include a description of him being married to politics. While he knew he was often portrayed as a lonely bachelor, it didn't matter. In actuality, he was a vibrant and vital part of our family. No matter how much of a realist he may have been with others, he saw in his family only perfection. To my siblings, cousins, and me, he played the role of doting grandfather. He watched many of my elementary school soccer games with the enthusiasm one might have given to a World Cup match. He praised my sister's musical performances as though she were on Broadway, and, even more importantly, he managed to stay awake. He was even a spectator during my early forays into competitive chess, which were nothing if not tedious, a sign of his true dedication. At age 87, he embarked on a new adventure with the family, having his first ever manicure at a salon with my then 11-year-old sister. His photograph still hangs in the salon, forever capturing that momentous occasion. As he became less mobile, I would go to meet him for lunch at high-power New York City restaurants. While others were discussing business or politics, he only wanted to get the latest updates on me and the family. Throughout it all, he was encouraging me to welcome each new challenge as it came, and to excel, although he was blind to the times when I may not have excelled quite so much. Not long ago, we attended Cirque du Soleil as a family, where I was introduced to the Clintons. While you, President Clinton, probably don't remember as vividly as I do, I distinctly recall my uncle boasting of my achievements to you, seemingly forgetting that he was speaking to a world leader. The irony was not lost on me, but the sentiment was appreciated. He and his accompanying devotion were a constant in my life, present at countless events, major and minor. We shared most holidays, numerous brunches, and he even placed my tallis on me the day I became a bar mitzvah. His support was unwavering, and his presence motivating. He helped me to understand the difference one can make, and how many lives can be bettered by the actions of a single person. He taught me the value of being active, of being honest, and certainly of speaking out. As my role model, he has helped shape my plans and goals for the future. It goes without saying that he wanted me to follow in his footsteps. Everyone has a story about Ed Koch. In the past few days, I have heard and read many of them, from his friends, colleagues, and countless people who he never even met and yet still managed to affect. I am truly awed by the extent of his influence, but to me, he will always be Uncle Eddie.
Pat, to you and to the entire Koch family, I come today with the love and condolences of 8.4 million New Yorkers who really are grieving with you at this moment, although Ed, on the other hand, has got to be loving all this attention. And I was particularly thrilled that he picked my neighborhood corner shul for his funeral. President Clinton, Mayors Dinkins and Giuliani, Governor Cuomo, Governors Pataki and Spitzer, Senator Schumer, Gillibrand and D'Amato, and city and state, federal and international officials and dignitaries, friends, family, and fellow New Yorkers. Everyone is here today. And I think there's no doubt that Ed is beaming, looking down on all of us assembled here. And I think it is fitting that he picked this place just a few blocks from a certain East River span. Before last year's State of the City speech, if you remember, we ran a video that included a shot of Ed standing at the entrance ramp yelling to all the cars that approached, "Welcome to my bridge, welcome to my bridge." Needless to say, it brought down the house. But what most people don't know is after the cameras stopped rolling, Ed stayed out there in the freezing cold for another 20 minutes yelling, "Welcome to my bridge." He loved it, and we loved him. No mayor, I think, has ever embodied the spirit of New York City like he did, and I don't think anyone ever will. Tough and loud, brash and irreverent, full of humor and chutzpah. He was our city's quintessential mayor. And more than anyone else, Ed knew that New York was more than a place. It is a state of mind. It is an attitude that he displayed to the world every day. And we had such respect for him because of his outsized personality, and that it was matched by his integrity, his intelligence, and his independence. I was lucky enough to get Ed's endorsement in my first run for mayor. He was one of the few people crazy enough to back me. I was new to politics, didn't know a thing about it, but I've always remembered the advice he gave me. He said, "Be yourself, say what you believe, and don't worry about what people think." And God knows he didn't worry about it. He was as genuine a politician as America has ever seen. He understood that if you take tough stances and give it to the people straight, they'll respect you for being honest even when they don't agree with you. And that scares the hell out of press secretaries and political consultants, but the average citizen in New York really admired it. Ed was a gifted student of human nature, but he was also a devoted student of government policy. He had a voracious appetite for information, and his colorful candor sometimes overshadowed the fact that his opinions were informed by tireless study of the issues. Over the years, many people turned to Ed for advice, including me. No one understood the job like he did, and no one was more eager to talk about it. He was always available, always direct, always wise. For example, I remember the time we were talking about how to tackle obesity, and he said, "Limit the size of sugary drinks, no one will notice." And then there was the time he told me, "Being mayor for 3 terms, it's really great, go for it." Well, what could I do? Actually, shortly after Ed was first inaugurated, he said, quote, "I'm going to act like a 1-term mayor, and as a result, I'll be a 3-term mayor." He knew from the beginning that the key to success lay in throwing political caution to the wind, and it's easy to forget just how badly our city needed that kind of leadership, because the New York that Ed inherited is almost unimaginable today. Graffiti-filled subways, miles of abandoned buildings, filthy streets that were unsafe to walk in daylight, much less at night, and municipal government that was broke and had stopped functioning. The South Bronx and other neighborhoods looked like they had been bombed out in an air raid. New York was in a state of despair and decay. And for the first time in our long history, the whole city seemed to be in terminal decline. Now, New York has always been a magnet for people, a place of growth and progress. As Ed once said, it's the place where, quote, the future comes to audition. But in the 1970s, that had ceased to be true. Then came Koch. Ed held up his hands and shouted, "Enough! We will not accept this. Our best days are still ahead." Ed convinced us that we could be great again. And he reminded us of why we love New York, and he inspired us to fight for it. He understood how tough our problems were, but because he had the confidence and courage to believe that problems could be cured, he not only arrested our decline and showed that this unruly city was governable, he was not only restoring the city's fiscal health and made us once again the nation's economic engine, he was not only building affordable housing where fires had raged, he not only made New York City once again a national leader in equal rights and arts and culture, he did something even more important. He restored the arc of our city's history. In the decade before Ed became mayor, we had lost our ways. And thanks to him, we became great again. And let me tell you, that was not inevitable. Ed made it so. It is fair to say that the city we know today would not exist without him. Everything that David Dinkins and Rudy Giuliani and I accomplished has been built on the foundation that Ed laid. It is a foundation that is as strong and as unshakable as Ed's faith in the genius and beauty of New York and his faith in God. Rabbi Posner, you'll be happy to know I've been doing my biblical research, and I think it's only fitting that this week's Torah portion is about Moses leading the Jews out of bondage in Egypt. Now, Ed, in his own way, was our Moses, just with a little less hair. He led us out of darkness, and he gave us hope. And while he may not have parted the Red Sea, he did break a subway strike by standing on a bridge and shouting words of encouragement. And just as Moses died right before he reached the Promised Land, Ed dies hours before the documentary about him opened in theaters. Leave it to Ed to find the best way to maximize publicity for a film about his life. No one ever enjoyed the theater of politics more than Ed, and no one was ever better at it. And as much fun as it was to watch Ed as mayor, the real show began when he left public office. Lawyer, author, professor, television judge, movie critic, restaurant reviewer, political commentator, reform organizer, Twitter user, even a radio host. The press and politicians never stopped asking his opinions, and so far be it from him to stop offering them, sometimes even unsolicited. He remained as sharp as ever and as relevant as ever, right up to his dying day. Now, as you know, Ed will be buried at Trinity Cemetery in Upper Manhattan. Just think about it. A Polish Jew in an Episcopal graveyard in a largely Dominican neighborhood. What could be more New York or even more Ed Koch? Ed admired people of all faiths, and he's deeply proud of his own. On his tombstone, Ed chose to have the last words of Daniel Pearl, who was beheaded overseas. And he inscribed with the words that Daniel Pearl said, "My father is Jewish, my mother is Jewish, I am Jewish." Has there ever been a simpler, more eloquent statement of pride in one's faith and in one's people than those 11 words? It was deeply moving to many of us when we realized that Ed had died on the anniversary of David Pearl's murder. Now, a few years ago, we were making a video about some of the tough times the city has been through when we asked him, "Would you ever live anywhere else?" Ed smiled, and then he looked straight in the camera and said, "The only place I would accept is heaven. Nothing else would take the place." It's not hard to picture Ed getting up to heaven, meeting God, and saying with a big smile, "How'd I do?" And there is no doubt, Cardinal, you're not going to be happy about this, but I'm telling you, I've talked to God, and I know what's happening. God said what so many people around the city and the country and all over the world have been saying over the last few days. Ed, you did great. You really did great. So God bless you, Ed Koch, and God bless the city you love so much and that you serve so well.
Pat, members of the family, the mayors, the governors, the senators, the other dignitaries that are here, yesterday I flew home from Japan after spending 8 hours there. It was Ed Koch's last gift to me because, you know, you pick up a whole day when you come back from Japan, and at our age, every day counts. So, thanks, Mayor. I come here to speak for myself and also for Hillary, who loved him very much and was grateful for his endorsement in every race she ran, and most grateful for a typically Ed Koch deal. After she became a senator, he said, you know, I was for you, and New Yorkers, we come from everywhere. Not everybody can be lucky like me and just be 100% New York, but you got to get better at this. So every holiday season for years, he organized the following lunch: Ed Koch, Hillary, and Al D'Amato. I have yet to receive a full report on any of those lunches, but it was so typically Ed. You know, we were told not to speak long. This is not my speech. These are the letters, just the letters that I got from Ed Koch when I was president. So I thought I'd tell you about him. He really weighed in when I was trying to pass the crime bill in 1995. He supported more police on the street, the limitation on the size of ammunition clips, the ban on assault weapons, and Governor, he'd be very proud of you today. But there was a whole other section of that bill which provided more funds for young people in troubled neighborhoods to engage in positive activities and things for kids to say yes to. And then he wrote me a whole bunch of letters over a period of 3 years, basically saying I hadn't done enough on that. One letter co-authored with the distinguished Harvard African-American professor Charles Ogletree, another from Ogletree, and Al Sharpton and Ed Koch, saying that it was imperative that we give young people who'd gotten in trouble a second chance, that they should be given a chance to serve in AmeriCorps or do something else. And then if they got their GED and they stayed off drugs, their records should be sealed and their convictions should be purged so that if ever they were asked again in life, did they have a criminal conviction, they could honestly say no. He said, you have to give people a second chance. Then there was a letter about the Holocaust Memorial and our sharing the opening and his unfailing support of Israel. There was a fascinating letter about the importance of not giving up on missile defense research and not making the Russians mad. He said, just do it with them. The scientists need work and we'll share it all. There were some of them that were rather funny. He was very proud of the mayor for his anti-smoking initiatives, and he hated cigarette smoke. And he loved the fact that Senator McCain joined many Democrats, and we made some progress in trying to roll back the tide of cigarette use, especially among young people. But late in my tenure, McCain tried another bill, and it didn't pass, and I couldn't pass it, and he was mad, and he said, you know, we've got to do something to convince these young people to quit smoking. And there's just been a new study saying that it impacts virility. And he said, you know, this Viagra is a big deal. This letter is hilarious. He said, now, politicians don't like to talk about this, especially among young people, but young people are way more sophisticated than older people, and they get this. And it doesn't work to tell people they're going to get cancer or respiratory diseases, go after the virility argument. Then, in 2000, when he became concerned about the turn in the election, he sent me a column he'd written. He sent me all his columns, but this one was really great, with the 10-point plan for victory for the Democrats in 2000. He wanted campaign finance reform, universal health care, a prescription drug benefits for seniors. He wanted no tax cuts until the debt was paid down. So, Mr. Mayor, it's not just New York that owes him a lot. And he had a lot of other interesting things. He still wanted to give young people a second chance. He used to say he was a liberal, but he was sane, which was another way of saying, I believe in government, but you have to look at the impact of this. I don't think I ever debated, discussed, agreed with, argued with anybody in this line of work who had a better feel for the impact of what people in government did on the real lives of people. He could imagine what life was like. One of his great second chance ideas was that there ought to be a universal scouting program for America, for really young people. And I had been out in Montana talking about meeting with some people in 4-H, and I said, you know, if every kid in America was in 4-H, we'd have half the problems we got. Ed wrote me a letter, and he said, no, we wouldn't. We'd have far less than half, and that's why you should get behind this scouting proposal of mine and let all these kids who have nothing else to do and who are disaffiliated, that was the word he used, disaffiliated, reconnect to the mainstream of life by giving them something positive to be a part of. Mayor Koch wrote 10 nonfiction books, 4 mysteries, and 3 children's books. The last one, he honored me by asking me to write a foreword to Eddie Shapes Up. And it was a direct response to the fact that childhood obesity is the #1 public health epidemic in America today. So the mayor got a lot of laughs out of his soda remark, but there is truth there. To the end of his life, he was thinking about what life would be like for the youngest people if they made choices or had choices forced on them that would foreclose their futures. Ed Koch wanted us all to shape up. I sent him a note on his 88th birthday, and he wrote me a nice letter back, and he didn't typically mention his own illness. Instead, he asked about Hillary's health instead. He had a big brain, but he had a bigger heart. So, Ed, how's she doing? She's doing fine, but she misses you. We're all doing fine, but we miss you. And we miss you so much because we all know we're doing a lot better because you lived and served.
Mrs. Taylor, President Clinton, Mayor Bloomberg, Governor Cuomo, I stand here today conveying these heartfelt condolences not only on behalf of the President of the State of Israel, Shimon Peres, and on behalf of the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, but also on behalf of an entire nation, the entire people of Israel. While President Peres and Prime Minister Netanyahu had the chance to know Mr. Koch personally, I'm standing here today on behalf of an entire nation that felt the same. Ed Koch was one of us. We, the Israelis, owe Ed Koch a great debt of gratitude for his long-standing support, friendship, unconditional love, and commitment to the Zionist movement and to the Jewish homeland. With his unique combination of charm and chutzpah and deep conviction, he became a clarion voice for Israel and one of the most important and influential American Zionists of our time. What he did for New York and Israel was way beyond the confines of an office. Ed Koch never let us down. Never. Our quintessential mayor literally bled for the Jewish state when he was lightly hit in the head by a rock during his 1990 trip to Israel. It was during the time of the First Intifada. It made headlines, but the real story is what followed. When he joked to the man standing next to him, "That rock was meant for you." Standing next to Ed Koch at the time was Jerusalem's mythological mayor, Teddy Kollek. The two had become lifelong friends, with Ed Koch calling Kollek the mayor of all mayors. Mayor Koch might have gotten a little more than he bargained for, but it was his warm heart, not his battle scars, that defined his relationships with Israel. The bond that Ed shared with Teddy between two mayors, two leaders, is the one New York and Jerusalem share, is the one Israel and the United States share. In addition to his contribution in the political arena, Ed Koch served as an important role model and source of inspiration to many mayors and community leaders in Israel as well as elsewhere. He took an active historical role in shaping the city of New York, leaving behind him a distinct legacy for the advancement and promotion of the performance and image of the city. Koch, his name used as a term of endearment, was a major catalyst in what later became known as the branding of New York as the capital of the free world, as an eclectic urban fascination for the entire world to celebrate and experience. When I first came to New York as a consul in the year 2001, it was the post-Koch era, but that did not stop Ed from continuing to be an accessible and valuable resource to us all, junior diplomats like myself at the time, as well as leaders in the Jewish community. Since I came in 2010 as a consul general, he would often call with questions to discuss issues in the news, even the movies, wanting to get the facts straight, and always curious and eager to know more. Ed Koch was one of a kind. Before he died, he made it known that he wanted his gravestone to be inscribed, among other things, with the most famous prayer in Judaism, Shema. It is a declaration of faith, a pledge of allegiance to one God and to the nation of Israel. The Shema is said upon arising in the morning and upon going to sleep at night. It is said when praising God and when calling upon Him. It is the first prayer that a Jewish child is taught, and it is the last words a Jew says prior to death. The prayer begins with the most sacred of words, Shema Israel. Literally, hear, O Israel. Mayor Koch, whether it was your candid outspokenness or your warm friendship, Israel hears you loud and clear. May your memory be blessed, and may you rest in peace, dear friend. Baruch Dayan Haemet.
Good morning. I'm Jim Gill. Please excuse my raspy voice. I first met Ed Koch in the early 1970s through a mutual friend, Alan Schwartz, and we became friends. When Ed left the Mayoralty in 1990, he asked to join our law firm, and I welcomed him with open arms. He had the office next to mine. We talked every day and went to lunch together regularly. For 22 years, I came to know him well. He was unique, one of a kind. Every day of his life was an all-out crusade for continued relevance and effectiveness. And every day he won. Everyone wanted to know his view on every issue. Everyone running for office wanted his endorsement and support. All of his Bloomberg commentaries and all of his movie reviews were written by him in longhand and put into final form by the ever-faithful Mary Garrigan and Jody Smith. He particularly enjoyed being on The Wise Guys on Channel 1 on Tuesday nights with his friend Al D'Amato, and writing children's books in his spare time with his beloved sister Pat. But his most treasured possession was his reputation for honesty and integrity. He defended that reputation with every fiber of his being. No criticism or challenge went unanswered, no matter who the charging party was, whether they were people in high places or ordinary citizens, and always in writing for the record. I recall his response to a particularly nasty criticism. Dear Madam, I have your letter of so-and-so. You are entitled to your opinion of me, and I am entitled to my opinion of you. My opinion of you is that you are a fool. All the best, Ed. Years ago, someone asked him, Mayor, why do people want to live in New York? It's expensive, hectic, loud, fast-moving, highly competitive, and with little greenery, to which he had a one-word answer: the excitement. He loved New York and all of its people. More than that, he was in New York. He hated being outside of the city. After leaving the Mayoralty, Ed received numerous invitations to speak in cities across the country. He always obliged, but always ensured that he would return to New York the same day, however inconvenient and no matter what. Whenever we walked the streets of New York together, people would recognize him immediately and frequently say, Mayor, we need you back. You've got to run again. To which he would invariably reply, no, the people threw me out, and now the people must be punished. At the end of the ceremony at which the 59th Street Bridge was renamed for him, Ed announced that there would be no tolls on his bridge. At that point, I turned to Mayor Bloomberg and said, "This is more than a renaming ceremony. He thinks he owns it." Over the past year, he said to me on numerous occasions, "I'm not afraid to die. God will take care of me," and indeed he will. Ed Koch had a beautiful soul. When you think of it, his entire life was in the service of others. As a soldier in World War II, as a councilman, a congressman, a mayor, and a commentator. That kind of service weighs in heavily with the Lord, and I'm sure that Ed is smiling down upon us this morning. Thank you.
Pat, family. Good morning. I'm John LaCicero. I first met Ed in 1963 when he was a district leader in Greenwich Village. A neighborhood issue had come up. Some friends suggested we needed some political clout. So two of us went up to the Village Independent Democrats to speak to him. After I finished my spiel, he said, "Forget about it. No one's going to go with you on this. By the way, why don't you join the club?" I said, "Join the club? You want me to join the club because I'm Italian?" He says, "You're right." I was shocked, and I'm thinking, here's a guy who said what he thinks. No baloney. I was hooked, and I did join. But his plain speaking was just part of him. He had so many strengths. He was one of those people who wanted the world to be a better place and was willing to put himself on the line to make it happen. You only had to look at his involvement in civil rights when he went to the southern states to help register African Americans to vote and marched in Selma, his stand on gay rights, abortion, women's rights, protesting the war in Vietnam, after which he was one of the first to ask for pardons for the guys who deflected to Canada. If he believed in something, he was there. He was extremely goal-oriented. That was a key driving force in him and was very much a part of why he went from district leader to city council, 5 terms in the House, and on to be the mayor of the city of New York. There were things that were needed to be done, and he was willing to spend the energy to see that they were. Just as important, he was able to inspire a cadre of volunteers to believe in him, a group of people who were never paid, had stayed with him and worked to get him elected through all those years. I must say, looking back, it is remarkable that he and I never had a real argument, particularly since he blamed me for his losing the governorship. And in true to form, when he did apologize, he did it in his usual flamboyant style at one of his birthday parties. As you all know, he could be very funny. He could come out with some really off-the-wall stuff. For example, I was with him in a human rights parade, and marching with me was the counsel to the Chinese government. Out of the blue, Ed turned to him and said, "If you would like to defect, I would help you." Then another time, Deng Xiaoping's son, who had been thrown off a balcony in China and had become handicapped, came to New York. He visited Ed at City Hall, at which time Ed asked him, "Did you get even with the people who did this to you?" The son made believe he didn't hear a thing. Ed could also be exasperating. I would set up a meeting with a political person or a group and warn them, stay clear of a certain subject. Abortion on Staten Island, the death penalty on the West Side. And what would he do? The first thing out of his mouth after we said hello would be his impassioned stand on abortion, or that the death penalty, delivered in his high-pitched and somewhat grating voice. That was another thing. We'd go out campaigning on the streets. It wouldn't take him more than 5 minutes before he would become pugnacious, either arguing with or berating one or all of those grouped around him. But somehow it worked. He was real. He didn't cater to anyone, and that came through. It was, I guess, what New Yorkers were comfortable with, because they elected him to one position after another for all those years. They were good years for me. I was a member of that cadre of loyal workers on each of his campaigns, and I never lost faith in him and what he was trying to do for the city of New York. When he went into City Hall, I saw firsthand how he worked with staff, how he encouraged us, whatever our rank, to speak up, to offer suggestions, to argue. He loved to argue. Best of all, we were close friends. He became a part of our family, our smallest circle, with my wife and my kids, and our entire tribe of relatives when he ran for mayor. He joined us on many Christmas Eves and Easters and spent time with us on Fire Island. And during those many years, there was our Saturday lunch with several close friends where we exchanged views, argued some more, and talked about political issues and the many people we knew, especially those who are here right today. That I will miss greatly. The city has lost a mayor who truly loved it, and I have lost a cherished friend.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Diane Coffey. Ed Koch would have loved this crowd. Thank you all so much for honoring him by your presence. At the outset, I want to say that no mayor has ever treated a predecessor as well as Mayor Bloomberg has treated Ed Koch. We have the mayor, first deputy mayor, Patty Harris, and her chief of staff, Nanette Smith, to thank for their help not only with the events today and tomorrow, but also for Mayor Koch's birthday party reunions for the last several years. Oh, and then there's that small matter of naming a very large bridge. So many people here had their own relationship with Ed, and I think each of us felt our relationship with him was unique. That's because a key to Ed's gift for leadership was his ability to meet people on their own terms without ever diluting his own, shall we say, distinctive personality. He motivated and challenged us. He expected and exacted the best from us. Because he believed in himself, he could believe deeply in other people. He inspired loyalty because he recognized so many different kinds of talent and always forged a team approach to addressing complicated issues. He may have argued vigorously over a decision, but once it was made, he supported and encouraged you every step of the way, and there were never any recriminations for speaking your mind. He combined his shrewd intellect with powerful intuition. He and I, excuse me, once had a bitter argument over something I cannot even remember, and I wouldn't speak to him for 3 days. On the 4th day, he called me into his office. You have to get the picture here. We had the old-fashioned version of an open office that I shared with 5 other people. He said, "Diane, this chill between us is upsetting the whole office. People are uneasy and they don't like it. It must end." Said I, "You owe me an apology." "Okay," said Ed. "I'm sorry. I apologize. Now can we be friends again?" So he opens the door and says to everyone in the outside office, breathlessly awaiting the outcome, "She was wrong, but I apologized." So you have to love a guy like that. Ed created a masterful connection between his instincts and his objectives. It shaped his fight to renew the pride and spirit of a city on its knees when he took over in 1978. As Ed said in Neil Barsky's documentary, Koch, which I urge you all to see, you have to get the attention of the public. You have to get them to follow you. The only way you can do that is by being bigger than life. And he was just that. I joined Ed for his first viewing of the movie, which we screened on Neil's desktop computer, small office. When it was over, Neil nervously asked, "Well, what do you think?" Ed said, "You go first." So I said, "The film is terrific, but it's a little long." Ed quickly said, "Long? What do you mean long? Dan, it's not too long." I said, "Well, that's because it's all about you." And he said, "Right." And we all laughed. That kind of joyful appetite defined Ed to the very end. He always looked forward to his birthday parties, taking enormous pride in the Koch alumni, so many of whom are here, for their commitment and accomplishments. This past December, there was some talk of canceling the event because of this hospitalization. When Ed got wind of it, he told me that under no uncertain circumstances should that happen. There was no way that party was to be canceled. He was coming, and if he died in the meantime, the party goes on without him. As it happened, he was released from the hospital 2 days before his birthday. And I called to see how he was. Rather than going to the office, had he gone home from the hospital to get some rest? "No," he said. "I went to the barber shop for a haircut." I said, "Oh my God, you're just like a boy at his first prom." And he said, "Exactly. I have to look good for my party." Indeed, he was enormously energized by the crowd that evening, delivering one of the best, moving, and most poignant speeches he had ever given. He also insisted on having his picture taken with every single guest, and he loved it when Mayor Bloomberg joined him for many of those photographs. The next day, when we rehashed the evening, he said so many people had come because they thought it was his last birthday party. I said, you thought so too, which is why you were so terrific." He said, "Exactly." That kind of honesty was at the core of Ed's approach to life and to his sense of his own mortality. To the chagrin of many close friends, Ed easily discussed his death. We began talking about his death in the 80s and his plans for it. Who else plans every detail of a burial so he can be visited in a cemetery located conveniently near a subway stop and has his tombstone engraved, epitaph and all, only omitting the date of death? He was thrilled and grateful early last week when I told him Mayor Bloomberg would be speaking at our service today. And if he had known Bill Clinton were coming, I mean, that would have been over the moon. He also was very grateful that Mayor Bloomberg had offered to have a Shiva for the family at Gracie Mansion. He wanted all the details all the time. Some people might find that morbid. I think it's totally consistent for a man who built his life on an unswerving commitment to seeing the world as it is, really seeing all the potential and humor and sadness and striving, and then working relentlessly to make it better. Every day with Ed was an adventure. I am eternally grateful for the opportunities he gave me. He was a special man, a wonderful friend. He shaped much of how I think and what I do, and that's the truth for so many of us here today. I think that is Ed's ultimate legacy, and I will always cherish him. Thank you.
Dear friends, please rise for the memorial prayer. El malei rachamim shochein bam romim, hamtzei menuchon tachas kanfei hashechina, b'ma'alos kadoshim utahorim kazora haraki amazirim, es nishmas Yidel Itzik ben Aharon Leib v'Yittel shehalach la'olamo, Lo chein ba'al harachamim yastirehu b'seisa kanofov la'orach yamim. Began Aiden tehemenu choso Adonai hunachalaso v'yanuach v'shalom al mishkavov v'nomar amen. O God, full of compassion, Thou who dwellest on high, beneath the sheltering wings of Thy presence, among the holy and the pure who shine on in the untroubled firmament of endless time, grant perfect rest unto the soul of Thy Son, Edward I. Koch. Lord of all mercies, keep him under the cover of Thy wings, and cause his soul to be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Be Thou forever his possession. May his repose always be peace. Amen.